Is Notcry too small? Is Sumeru too big? How could a fan of exploration not care either way? Each Genshin region emphasizes different parts of exploration, with its own blend of pros and cons, which inevitably leads to discussions and disagreements about which one is better than another. Every player brings their own unique set of preferences, and half the time, people seem to just keep talking past each other. I think most would agree Hoyo have made improvements over the years in at least some ways, but then again, the nostalgia for those early days is strong. There were some good ideas which have been lost along the way, and the later regions are far from flawless. With Snezhnaya on the horizon, it's been so interesting to see people's hopes and expectations and how different they can be. One common theme is that many want it to be huge. On that particular point, I kinda don't care anymore. It's important to emphasize, different people want different things from Genshin. To many, the most fundamental appeal of the game is that it can satisfy a deep yearning to explore. They want to spend time wandering through unfamiliar lands, dazzled by stunning views backed by incredible music, learning new things, meeting new people, and experiencing their stories. To some, it's vital for the world to be filled with fragments of forgotten history so that they can spend their time searching for obscure clues which unlock new understanding. They still enjoy those other aspects, but the thing which keeps them coming back is that gigantic puzzle they want to piece together, and when it's missing, the world feels less alive. But to others, the exploration is a chore they must complete in order to collect rewards. They play the game for other reasons, for the story, for the combat, for collecting waifus, for their incurable gambling addiction, for anything really. Hoyo's challenge is to create a game which appeals to each of those personas and probably more besides. They've tried a lot of different things over the years. Most work well for some players while making it worse for others, while some rare few make it better for everyone. One in particular might be the key to making us all happy in Snezhnaya. The information they use to inform those decisions would be fascinating to see. What percentage of players actually explore each region? How many give up before 50% completion? How many make it to 80? How many to 100? What does the distribution look like? Can they see correlation between world design decisions they made in different regions and the behavior patterns of the players? Can they group people into those personas and plot how different designs affect each one? How do they avoid reaching the wrong conclusions? And how does this information affect their plans? Did they decide too many players were leaving too much content untouched and therefore the time they spent crafting larger maps was wasted? Or have they been searching for ways to make it so compelling that even people who don't prioritize exploration will complete it anyway so they can get back to building a more expansive world? Sadly, we'll likely never know, and we're left with limited perspective. Any online discourse is inherently biased, since only dedicated fans would care enough to actually get involved. For a game like Genshin, that's a tiny minority. And while we can observe what Hoyo do, the cause and effect are far apart. Even if some insight leads them to change their approach the moment they discover it, the content they're working on at any given time may be in development for a year or more before it gets released. Personally, I'm here for exploration first and foremost, but from what I've seen, my thoughts during Notcry have diverged a fair bit from many others who have that same preference. As always, this region has its strengths and weaknesses, and there are a bunch of things I still hope they'll change, but one thing I see other exploration lovers complain about a lot, which I don't care about, is how small it is. I'd have loved more, but I don't mind it being small. A few years ago, I would have cared a lot. I finished the exploration just days after each new region released without ever referencing any maps or guides, and always craved more. Even in the run-up to the release of Notcry, I was hoping we'd get more map expansions this time around. It's been far smaller than I originally hoped, but to my surprise, that fact hasn't bothered me. The gap between what I thought I wanted and how I felt in the end has me trying to figure out where my own feelings came from and why it's so different to the experience of so many others I'd usually agree with. To understand, let's look back at the regions we've explored so far, see the important changes along the way, both good and bad, and some opportunities I think they missed. In the early days of wandering around Mondstadt and Liyue, the world felt huge and vibrant, and everything was new. The experience was filled with friction, stamina was scarce, cliffs were huge and impassable, traversal mechanics were rare and did little to help you move around the world. You had to really work hard to get anywhere, and the chests you got at the end were usually the smaller ones. And yet, a lot of people loved it. It was all about the journey rather than the destination. I wonder if part of the reason that perspective fell away for a lot of people is that in the early days we were interacting with systems which would also give us permanent rewards as well, ones which directly improved the gameplay experience, while over time those kinds of rewards have become rare. It felt satisfying to collect the oculi when you could see your stamina gauge get longer and you could feel the difference it made to your ability to move around the world. I always wonder how different the game would have been in the long run if they had leaned into this more. I suspect it would have made a massive difference for many. It would have felt perfectly natural for the system to branch out and include even more useful changes at higher levels. Maybe, once you reach max stamina, you could unlock things like faster climbing, or charged jump ability to gain greater distance, or advanced traversal skills which would allow you to scale an overhang, for example. It's a shame they went down the route of only adding region-specific movement gimmicks and creating characters with traversal mechanics as their selling point. I feel like the expansions, which came in the year or so after those first two regions, all had one common thread. They each felt hostile to the player in some way. Dragonspine had sheer cold, Enkanomiya had that habit of pushing you off the edge of the cliffs and into its bottomless pit, the chasm underground was moody and oppressive and filled with toxic goop. Inazuma, of course, stands out even more. Its devastated, war-torn landscape seemed to actively want to kill you, and the mournful music made those almost apocalyptic vibes feel incredibly immersive. I think these are fantastic ways to give the region a sense of self, but the hostility may have gone a little too hard at times, especially because the world quests which calmed each Inazuman island down were long and time-gated. Inazuma is also famous for its puzzles. They actually asked you to use your brain, but unfortunately the game's own systems sometimes got in the way and made them more frustrating to interact with than they perhaps deserved. This is one of those places where I can buy into the theories. I can easily imagine large waves of players, especially the more casual ones, finding these more hostile regions a little bit too much to handle. This would show up in Hoyo's analytics, and they may have concluded that to keep more people happy, they should dial it back a little. Assuming that's true, I personally feel they overcorrected. I miss puzzles which were even vaguely challenging. I prefer the more polished interactions we've got in later regions, but there's far less satisfaction to be found when everything is so easy. And I do wish they'd bring back that hostile atmosphere, at least in smaller parts of each region. That brief glimpse of the Marajavari in Bennett's quest shows just how spectacular Hoyo could make a truly devastated region, and I'll be disappointed if they don't give it another try, even though I love the lush landscapes we've got instead. And speaking of times when Hoyo took the wrong lesson from the way players reacted, I've always wondered what happened with the Three Realms Gateway Offering event. In version 2.4, they released Enkanomiya, an absolutely stunning hidden region filled with ancient history and countless puzzles to solve. In version 2.5, they released an exploration event which sent us back to explore the same region and open yet more chests in the same places. Back then, we didn't even have that incentive event forcing people to finish exploring each new region within a couple of months of its release, so I'd be unsurprised if most people hadn't even finished their first go-around exploring Enkanomiya by the end of the patch. So even at the time, it seemed a little odd for them to immediately follow up with an event where we explore the same region. And since then, we've never had another event like it. I seem to remember it being quite well received, but maybe it just didn't drive enough interaction. But regardless of the reason, the actual solution would be for them to wait. This kind of event would be awesome for regions we haven't visited for a long time. An event where we re-explore Notcry right now would feel like pointless repetition, but one where we go back to Inazuma or Sumeru, people would feel such nostalgia. Just look at how much love there was for that second Golden Apple Archipelago event despite its repeat exploration, or the recent Homeward event in Mondstadt. And as I've said before, this kind of event would be a perfect opportunity to go back and add some much needed improvements to those earlier regions. Imagine a permanent event which unlocks after you've finished, say, Sumeru Archon Quest, in which you re-explore key parts of Liyue, which would add spirit cups to aid traversal all over the map. The original experience would remain intact during the Archon quests, older players would have a huge hit of nostalgia to enjoy, and some of the game's flaws would be ironed out for anyone who hasn't explored everything. Bonus points if they also added the Notcry-style compass to past regions too. That's another obvious win which they really should get around to adding. Instead, Hoyo might have taken the wrong lesson from that Enkanomiya event and concluded they should never try that again. Sumeru's first region was magnificent. It came out in the time when I was still completely hooked on Genshin's exploration, so the vast, lush forests will forever be a high point for me, and I'm still disappointed that they didn't add more. While it's not quite my favorite overall, I think they had a pretty decent balance of traversal here. The zip lines were far more polished than the janky Inazuma ones, and even though the forest was huge, each point of interest felt pretty comfortable to reach. The main thing, which I remember being frustrated with in early Sumeru, was the team composition. composition requirements. In the first 3 nations, a huge portion of the puzzles required you to use your character's elemental abilities to interact with the world. This made everything feel cohesive. The characters in your team mattered, even during exploration. The actions, which drove combat, were also vital when running around the world. In Sumeru, I remember having much more trouble with this than I ever had before, because the interactions in each area often required more than the 4 elements you could keep in your team at one time. Changing teams is ridiculously tedious in Genshin, so this rough spot always bothered me. In the regions after Sumeru, I feel like they tried to solve this by avoiding elemental puzzles. Fontaines focused on Numa and Uja, Natlands were all about the Saurians, and Notcries have used Kuvaki. Even though that removes a source of friction, I feel like it's a downgrade overall. There are alternatives. They could take inspiration from their competition and give us some gadgets like a torch to apply pyro, for example, but I think the biggest missed opportunity was that they did not allow Traveler to switch elements freely outside of combat. They could be a god-tier exploration character, someone you'd actually want to use. Despite that flaw, I loved Sumeru's Rainforest, and I still hold out hope that we'll get more someday. And, of course, the rest of Sumeru is its vast desert, which turned out to be very divisive. For a long time, the consensus seemed to be that it was too big and empty, and desert fatigue was a huge point of discussion throughout, with people left exhausted by the end of the 3 straight expansions of Endless Desert. Some people seem to have revised their opinion on this region after Notcry. Now that they've experienced the region they consider too small, they yearn for a wider world. However, I was frustrated by the desert for a completely different reason, and while I would have loved some more variety, the desert's sheer size wasn't the issue. I saw this beautiful desert, filled with fascinating mysteries buried beneath the sands, and could not wait to delve deep like a fantasy Indiana Jones. But when I tried to explore, I found every single path I wanted to take was barred by locked doors. I like world quests when they're done well, but only if I'm in the right mood. When I'm not looking forward to it, all that reading chopped into tiny chunks feels extremely tedious, and it's infinitely worse when my favorite part of the game is locked behind something I have zero interest in at that particular moment. Many people prefer their exploration to exist alongside these stories, so this worked fantastically well for them. I suspect the experience will have been a highlight for the Loreologists as well. Sadly, for me, it was a massive disappointment. This irrevocably changed my relationship to Genshin. It drove me to look for other games which would scratch that exploration itch, and even though Fontaine ended up healing my Genshin burnout, I think this is why I no longer feel disappointed when they give us fewer map expansions than I thought I wanted. I've always got something else to play, so I can just stick to something else for a while and enjoy Genshin more when they do bring out something new. Despite that, I'm kinda glad to see people rediscovering some love for the desert itself. It's a beautifully realized region, and they did a better job with making a map of that scale feel engaging than many give them credit for. Fontaine's magical underwater world was the balm I needed after the frustration of the desert quests. I was nervous about it since I generally dislike underwater exploration in other games, but it turns out the reason for that was the endless tension I feel when managing an oxygen meter. Since Genshin skipped that whole mechanic, I loved the experience. The controls felt fluid to me, and the ambiance was just stunning. I've seen a lot of people say they found the underwater to be tedious and uninteresting, at least in part because of how they handle underwater combat, yet again proving that nothing can appeal to everyone. Something which stood out to me, in contrast to Sumeru, was Fontaine's balance between freeform and guided exploration. Anything you can see is explorable, but there are hidden depths all over the place which are only revealed to you through exploration quests. I think this is a great way to cater to both types of people, and I've been glad to see it continue in Natlan and Notcry. On the other hand, I've seen some say Fontaine had a bit of a theme park feel, with beautiful locations which each feel kind of a set piece, while everything in between feels like a series of empty connecting pathways without their own identity. As much as I loved Fontaine, I can kinda see their point, though given how much I loved many of those set pieces, I can just about look past it as a compromise. One thing I still can't get over, however, is the area around Beda Harbor, the new region in Sumeru's forest, which is completely empty. I get that they have a Primogen budget, which limits how many rewards they can release in any single patch, but having it completely empty of anything interesting was a huge disappointment, especially for people like me who had yearned for more forest to explore for so long. But in stark contrast, one of the other Fontaine patches brought my favorite region in the game, Chenyu Vale. The Spirit Curbs are the perfect regional traversal mechanism. They provide speed, comfort, and far more control than any other mechanism has, while also giving Hoya control control over the intended player paths via careful placement of chain traversal points. The landscape perfected that balance between providing enough friction to feel like you're exploring a real place and providing freedom to zoom around without restriction, and the aesthetics, music, and general feel of the place was incredible. Either way, for my tastes, Fontaine was fantastic overall. Meanwhile, Natlan was more of a mixed bag from my perspective. The world is stunningly beautiful in my opinion. I've seen people say it's childish for it to have so much color, but honestly, that just reminds me of how the only truly childish thing is the desire to be seen as very grown up. I would have loved the aesthetic even more if they had a contrasting region in the overworld, a devastated war-torn hellscape like the Marajavari, though that would have needed some kind of world-building changes I explored in my Natlan retrospective. I still feel that Natlan's opening regions leaned way too far into the character traversal mechanics. It degraded the exploration gameplay loop for anyone who didn't have them. Everywhere else, the loop is see point of interest, traverse towards it, solve puzzle or other interaction, get reward, repeat. In Natlan, without the right character, it became see point of interest, look around for a relevant Saurian in Dwell, lumber slowly back to where you started, then traverse, solve, get reward, repeat. That is only a little extra friction, but when repeated over and over, it gets frustrating. I found those first 3 regions utterly beautiful, but even though I did pull for the first few 5 stars, I was left feeling a little let down. However, the rest of Natlan struck a better balance on those points. Och Natlan in particular was fantastic, so much fun to explore even without any of the traversal characters, and the Ancient Sacred Mountain was for me even better. The volcano's interior is in my top 5 favorite exploration experiences in the entire game. It's become very hard to separate people's feelings toward Natlan as a whole from any specific subsection. That discussion became so divisive that most people reduced their perspective down to either I loved Natlan or I hated Natlan, and all of the interesting nuance gets lost. I feel like many of the rough edges in Genshin's exploration come from the connection between exploration and rewards, and the limited time exploration events added in Natlan are a perfect microcosm. Even without gacha involved, many gamers have long been conditioned to view exploration as a means to an end. They expect a tangible reward for any effort they put in, maybe a piece of information, or even some powerful equipment, something which will make a material difference to their experience in the game. Gacha currency plays this role in Genshin, which makes it even harder for some people to comprehend that anyone would actually want to spend their time exploring things, and the quality of life features designed to streamline exploration can actually lessen the experience for those who don't want them. Even if the developers avoid the trap of breaking the incentive structures which lead to good world design, the soul of the game is already corrupted, twisted to trigger FOMO wherever possible, which leads to people's race to harvest these rewards and devalue the experience itself. Those exploration reward events are the clearest example yet of those manipulative incentives, since they actively punish you for taking your time. Instead, you're pushed towards the culture, which leads to people using interactive maps as a checklist, skimming through the world as quickly as they can to farm for pulls. This perspective naturally leads to complaints about anything which makes the experience anything less than flawlessly convenient. I do not want any of that. I want a world which feels alive, which gives me that feeling of discovery. Genshin at its best manages that more than many other games, and in retrospect, I think these events were a step in the wrong direction. And finally, Not Cry. Overall, I've been pretty happy with it, even though every aspect has its downsides. The whole place has a barren beauty which is stunning at times, and the music is of course sublime. There's a density and variety to the points of interest, which means any time spent exploring always feels rewarding, and the world feels alive thanks to all the little interactions between the animals and robots and magical beings all over the place. But on the other hand, the backdrop to Lauma's domain really emphasized just how stunning this region could have been if they had given it a little more variety. That lush Nordic forest would have been magical to explore. The mechanics sometimes feel unpolished, the traversal is a step back compared to the best of what came before, and the puzzles have been even easier. I suspect it's also been a bit of a disappointment for the loreologists. The Archon quests finally brought all the previous lore front and center, but while exploring, I swear I've seen far fewer of those puzzle pieces throughout the world. And of course, it's undeniably small, an archipelago which feels feels less expensive than Inazuma and which has fewer expansions as well. You can really tell just how dense it's had to be when even simple puzzles lead to multiple chests at once, a far cry from the more sparse rewards in previous regions. As I mentioned earlier, the map size doesn't matter to me in the same way it used to. I care far more about the quality of the exploration, and while I feel they may have overcorrected on density and the simplicity of traversal, it's been an enjoyable experience overall, though I do wish they had the confidence to add some more challenging puzzles, and I would not have complained if it had been much bigger. I think it's pretty clear that Notcry's biggest innovation is the new treasure compass, which finally means exploration can work well for both people who are here to explore and the polar opposite who find exploration an annoying chore. In games where tools like the compass are available too early, the devs have no incentive to take care with how they place things in the world. It takes time and skill to make something artificial feel natural, and time is extremely valuable in the games industry. It's far cheaper to scatter rewards across the landscape with no thought to whether their placement makes sense and rely on the players using their power tools to hoover up all the rewards. But when a game does that, for those of us who don't want to use the power tools, the experience feels awful. By limiting the compass's abilities at first, the devs still have to take care when placing points of interest, so the incentive to craft a well-designed world remains in place. But by progressively unlocking greater detail, those who just want to skip past and find everything are able to do so far more easily. I've seen some people say there's literally no exploration anymore because of the compass, but I disagree thanks to those incentives. I suspect this feeling comes more from the smaller map instead, and if Hoya were to take the same approach in a much larger region, it would feel very different. Though that said, it would be even better if they gave us control over which level of compass ability is active, so that people could just continue using the more basic version if they wanted to. When it comes to Snezhnaya, I noticed a couple of moments in the recent livestream where they said things like a map of this scale, which can be taken as a potential hint that the map will be as big as people hope. And that one vital improvement, which can make the biggest difference, the new treasure compass, feels like it might allow them to make Snezhnaya huge while keeping the people who dislike exploration happy. Because, after all, at its highest level, it removes almost all the effort. If they do that right, in the end, the size doesn't matter. Instead, the key to making Snezhnaya a success is bringing the best of everything which came before and learning the right lessons from the players' reactions in the past. Personally, I hope we can have a nation which feels huge and vibrant and fresh, with genuine challenge and maybe even some moments where the world itself feels hostile once more. I wish we'd get some difficult puzzles that require some genuine thought to solve. We need traversal which feels engaging and interesting without removing so much friction that we lose all sense of place. And as always, I want variety, with the colour and creativity which mark the best of Teyvat so far, and hidden places to uncover buried deep beneath the snow filled with new mysteries for people to uncover. I'd hope that even if they do deliver something that ambitious and which focuses on exploration, the people who don't enjoy would still have a good time. The compass and the traversal would be key to that. My biggest copium is that perhaps the reason Natlan and Notcry had fewer maps is that Hoya World design teams had been shifted to make Snezhnaya absolutely incredible. The spanner in the works there is, again, the limited rewards we get per patch and the percentage completion event. Even if the map is large, it would be a big surprise if we get significantly more rewards, but as long as the distribution is reasonable, even a larger map could work for everyone now. It's possible that they give us a dense but confined world and use the Paimon barrier to block off the wider wilderness. They might keep the rewards in confined areas and make the wilds open to us but completely barren of anything of interest. I hope they give us a wide and beautiful world we can lose ourselves in instead. So, why would I say size doesn't matter, even though I still want to lose myself in exploration? It's because what I really want is a world which builds the illusion that exists for its own sake, with places within it which are worth finding. Snezhnaya could be an endless barren snowscape with far-flung towns connected by lonely locomotives, with all the points of interest clustered around the isolated points of warmth. Or its reputation could have been a facade, an illusion to distract the gods, with the real region far smaller than we expect. Many people hoping for that first one would be bitterly disappointed by the second. While I can sympathize, as long as the journey is one which sparks that sense of adventure, I'd still enjoy it in the end. Until next time.